Lo que estamos viendo dentro del gobierno del presidente Donald Trump ya no es desgaste, es desintegración. Su propio equipo, sus aliados y hasta quienes él considera incondicionales están huyendo como si el edificio estuviera a punto de venirse abajo. Y lo mejor, él lo sabe. El presidente está intentando fingir control, pero cada gesto lo delata. Está debilitado, aislado y rodeado de gente que ya prepara su propio escape. Y hoy vamos a ver exactamente cómo ese derrumbe lo está dejando sin herramientas, sin autoridad y sin la capacidad mínima de gobernar.
Every poll of his presidential job performance, the Trump retreat is underway. And the Department of Government Efficiency, we discovered this morning, no longer exists. That doesn't exist. Office of Personnel Management Director Scott Cooper told Reuters when asked about the Department of Government Efficiency status. Reuters reported that today at 8:37 a.m. And so Elon Musk's indefensible plaything, which produced no government efficiency but did deliver the worst cruelty the United States has ever visited upon people outside of war, is no more. In its heyday, the Elon and Donald show lit up the Oval Office, the room filled with reporters and cameras, and Elon Musk never faced a question from those reporters about what he was doing to the 400,000 children who were dying because of his playing with government, because of what he did to the United States Agency for International Development. Not one question from the White House press corps to Elon Musk about that. There is no more vivid image of the decline and fall of Donald Trump than the image that was created on Friday with Donald Trump slumped in the Oval Office at the desk in defeat, offering a political surrender to the man who stood beside him in the Elon Musk position, a man 20 years younger than Elon Musk and immeasurably smarter, a man who took over that room as no one before him has ever taken over that room with Donald Trump in it. Donald Trump went from calling the man a communist lunatic to glad-handing him publicly.
Esto que acabamos de ver retrata a un presidente que perdió el control de todo. Trump intentó mostrar músculo, buscó reciclar su vieja pose de líder duro, pero terminó apareciendo como un funcionario agotado, entregado y sin capacidad de imponer absolutamente nada. Ni siquiera logra mantener la ilusión de la fuerza cuando se enfrenta a alguien que sí tiene un proyecto. Si tiene convicción y tiene autoridad real, Trump en cambio se derrumba en un público y quien se derrumba en público ya perdió puertas adentro. Y mientras su imagen se hunde, ¿qué hace el presidente? Repite trucos viejos, anunciar otra vez que ahora sí tiene un plan de salud revolucionario, el mismo plan fantasma que promete desde hace años. Pero antes de entrar a ese punto, veamos el siguiente clip.
Negotiating with lawmakers, and I've had personal talks with some Democrats. I can't tell you who they are. I just don't want to do that. It's not fair to them. About paying large amounts of dollars back to the people. You know, this was my idea. It came up during that. You know, oftentimes under times of stress, like the shutdown.
Ese es el nivel del presidente, improvisar frases sin sustancia para ganar tiempo. Sabe que su índice de aprobación está en mínimos históricos, sabe que ya nadie le cree. Y ahora, para colmo, su propio marionetista en la Cámara de Representantes, Mike Johnson, le está diciendo públicamente que no lo va a acompañar. La noticia es clara. Johnson le cerró la puerta al nuevo plan de salud y le advirtió que los republicanos no quieren extender subsidios que mantienen a millones de estadounidenses con cobertura. El resultado, Trump queda atrapado en un dilema. Si fuerza su falso plan, rompe su ya frágil mayoría en la Cámara. Si deja expirar los subsidios, 4 millones pierden cobertura, 22 millones ven duplicarse sus primas y su aprobación se hunde todavía más. Johnson no actúa por principios, actúa por miedo. Miedo a perder su cargo, miedo a que su propio bloque implote, miedo a ver demócratas tomando el control de comités claves capaces de investigar el gobierno de Trump y su papel en el encubrimiento de los archivos Epstein. Y en medio de esta crisis, ¿a qué se dedica Trump? Corrupción y fantasías diplomáticas.
He's been arrested overnight. He says, yeah, I spoke to him last night. And we're going to be meeting, I believe, in the very near future. Were you planning on going to Brazil, Mr. President? Because this dude's on house arrest with an ankle monitor. He can't leave home. How are you going to be meeting with him in the very near future? I mean, Bolsonaro, they arrested him like 6 a.m. Saturday morning. He was rearrested for the most far-fetched thing in the world, right? Trying to remove his ankle monitor and apparently, they believe, try to flee the country. And Bolsonaro has come up with a story now that the only reason he took a soldering iron to his ankle monitor is because he said he was hallucinating. He said he was having a nervous breakdown because of a change in his medications recently, and that caused him to start hallucinating on Friday night, and that's what happened. He was basically tripping. And so that's what happened, and he can't be held accountable for his actions. But now here's the president of the United States on Saturday confirming that actually on Friday night, Bolsonaro might have been tripping, but he was talking to President Trump at the time. And they were making plans to be together, in Trump's words, in the very near future. He was under house arrest and about to start a 27-year prison sentence. How are you going to be together in the very near future? I mean, when Trump said that, he must have meant that Bolsonaro was coming to America, right? He definitely could not have done that without breaking off his ankle monitor and fleeing the country and going on the lam. And apparently the president of the United States was like, in on the plan?
So I spoke last night to the gentleman you just referred to, and we're going to be meeting, I believe, in the very near future.
Is that what you thought was going to happen? I mean, in any other presidency, this is like the end, right? This is a show-stopping scandal. A U.S. president who appears to be in on a plan to jailbreak a fugitive former dictator and bring him to America, right? I mean, who knows? Maybe this is all just a big misunderstanding. Maybe it was a different Jair Bolsonaro he was speaking to. I don't know. But with any other president, everything would screech to a halt until this made sense, right? Here, it's just one story today, one more bad news story. As this president, as our president, continues wading through what really is just the worst and
Este es el detalle que revela todo. Un presidente rodeado de escándalos, sin control de la agenda, inventando contacto con un exmandatario en arresto domiciliario. Cualquier presidente serio enfrenta una crisis institucional gigantesca por insinuar participación en un posible intento de fuga internacional. El país está sin rumbo, el Congreso está paralizado, su propio partido ya amenaza con abandonar el barco y él sigue imaginando reuniones imposibles con líderes caídos mientras su administración se hunde. Esto es Rumor de Estado.
Trump, Pam Bondi y todo MAGA quieren que creas que el capítulo Epstein ya terminó, que Trump firmó un papel, que los archivos saldrán solos y que debemos pasar página. No, justo ahora es cuando más hay que hablar del caso, porque además de la maniobra para dosificar la información, Bondi acaba de ser demandada por el despido ilegal de un funcionario del Departamento de Justicia, que expuso cómo planean cubrir nombres y proteger a los suyos. Vamos a desmenuzarlo con clips, análisis y puentes claros.
I know someone promised that they would make America great. I am telling you that they are doing just the opposite. I am telling you that we are a land of immigrants. It is time to do immigration right. It is time to make sure that we live up to the promise of this country. The idea that someone ran and said that I will get rid of the bad guys, yet we know more than 50% of the people that are currently being detained in custody have no criminal records at all. Zero, nada. So tell me why you are taking those people out of their communities. They are our neighbors. They are our friends. And frankly, they contribute to the fabric of this country. They are what make this country great, not your thuggish ICE agents who literally are spitting on our Constitution, as well as everything that we think patriotism ought to be. So with that, I want you to know, whether you are in Los Angeles, whether you are in Chicago, whether you are in any city in North Carolina, let me be clear. Democrats, specifically on the Oversight Committee, we got your back. I want you to know that this is about doing what's right. This isn't right or left for us. This is right or wrong. And I am telling you right now, this administration is wrong.
El mensaje es directo. El orden de este gobierno no es seguridad, es espectáculo y crueldad. Se presume de mano dura mientras se desvían recursos hacia redadas de vecinos sin antecedentes y se deja en la sombra lo urgente. Esa asimetría, tolerancia con poderosos, dureza con vulnerables, es la misma lógica que hoy intenta blindar nombres en los archivos Epstein. Con ese marco, escuchemos cómo está cocinando la transparencia a plazos desde el propio Capitolio y por qué Bondi ya tiene lista la coartada de la investigación en curso, como dijo en anteriores videos.
Donald Trump has been leading a massive cover-up. There's no question. Pam Bondi's been helping. Mike Johnson and Republicans have been complicit. And it wasn't until we forced this vote that now we're seeing Republicans actually go on the record and join us in a really strong effort to get these files released. One thing that we've been concerned about is, as you know, Alex, there's two efforts. There's the subpoena through the committee, which demands a release of all the files. Then there is now this law that was passed, the Conamassey resolution, that does the same thing. And they both work together to get these files released. But what Pam Bondi is doing now is she's essentially saying that if there's an open investigation, that somehow that would possibly, as we all know, could lead to not releasing all of the documents. That's concerning to us because that's obviously language that's in the law. It's very typical in these types of laws. What the Attorney General needs to remember is that our subpoena doesn't have that language.
Dos carriles obligan al Departamento de Justicia, la ley recién aprobada y el citatorio del comité. Bondi ya se aferra al resquicio clásico de investigación abierta. Para reservar piezas claves, ojo, el citatorio no incluye esa válvula de escape. Si de verdad quieren transparencia, tienen que cumplir ambos. Y aquí es cuando entra la bomba del día de hoy, la demanda que le acaban de interponer a Bondi por despedir a un funcionario, un operativo de cámara oculta. Nos importa por dos razones: revela el plan de redacciones y muestra el pánico dentro del Departamento de Justicia. El titular dice así: Bondi recibe demanda de un funcionario del Departamento de Justicia despedido por una operación de honeypot. Un funcionario de larga trayectoria del Departamento de Justicia despedido después de una operación encubierta con cámara oculta demandó a la fiscal general Pam Bondi y al gobierno de Estados Unidos. Documentos judiciales alegan que Joseph Schnitt fue expulsado ilegalmente sin el debido proceso después de que el agente de derecha James O'Coffey lo grabara en secreto en una cinta de Hinge. Había pasado más de 2 décadas en el Departamento de Justicia y se desempeñaba como subdirector interino de la Unidad de Operaciones Especiales, que supervisa el Programa Federal de Seguridad de Testigos, cuando Bondi lo despidió personalmente el 5 de septiembre de 2025. En una denuncia de 23 páginas presentada el lunes en el Tribunal Federal de D.C., Schnitt afirma que el Departamento de Justicia lo expulsó arbitraria e ilegalmente por los comentarios que hizo durante lo que él creía que era un almuerzo privado con una posible pareja romántica. Schnitt fue puesto en la mira de un agente encubierto que trabajaba para O'Coffey Media Group, quien utiliza el alias Skylar para traer a discutir los archivos de Jeffrey Epstein, un tema que dominaba los titulares en ese momento. En el video que siguió, O'Coffey presentó a Schnitt revelando el conocimiento interno sobre cómo el Departamento de Justicia planeaba redactar nombres republicanos o conservadores en los archivos, pero dejar a todas las personas liberales y demócratas en esos archivos. El memorando de despido de una sola página de Bondi citó la autoridad del artículo 2 y declaró que sus comentarios en la noche de citas eran públicamente inapropiados y perjudiciales para los intereses del departamento. La demanda no solo cuestiona el proceso, confirma el tema de fondo. Dentro del Departamento de Justicia hay conciencia y miedo de que la transparencia que tanto aclaman será selectiva. El despido express busca diluir filtraciones y blindar el relato oficial. Si el objetivo fuese publicar todo con rigor, no haría falta casas de brujas ni honeypots. Y mientras el ejecutivo aprieta, la intimidación escala también contra voces del Congreso y de las Fuerzas Armadas que recuerdan algo básico: obedecer órdenes legales y rechazar ilegales. Escuchemos.
I wanted to ask you about that pledge, that we have your backs. It's sort of the apex of that piece, that video that you made with your colleagues. What does that mean in practical terms? If I'm an enlisted service member somewhere, maybe I'm serving in Southern Command, maybe I'm asked to do something that I believe is illegal or that I have received advice might be illegal. If those service members are thinking about you right now as being on their side, as having their back, what does that mean in practical terms about what that service member can do when faced with a potentially illegal order from the commander-in-chief and from the chain of command?
Well, Rachel, I spent 25 years in the United States Navy. I flew 39 combat missions over Iraq and Kuwait. Let me start by saying I never questioned any order. And you're required to follow all legal orders. You're also required not to follow illegal ones. And I think most people can figure out, just take some common sense in what would be an illegal order. But I think it's important for people to know that they need to be able to stand up and speak out. And I wanted them to know that members of Congress understand that this president doesn't seem to care about the Constitution, the rule of law. And I have to say, I don't think there's anything more patriotic than standing up for the Constitution. And right here, right now, this week, the president clearly is not doing that.
Of the 6 Democratic lawmakers who made these statements, which have so upset the president, he's coming after you. At least he's coming after you first. Do you have any opinion as to why he may have singled you out in this way?
I don't know. We would have to ask him that question. Could be him. Could be Pete Hegseth. I don't know. And I would have been really shocked if any other president did this. But when I saw that tweet today, it kind of sort of made sense. I mean, these two guys, they informed me of this in a tweet, because this is not about the law. This is about the media cycle, and it's about intimidation. And it's almost, the whole thing's almost comical. Like, how does reciting the UCMJ, how is that, which is the Uniform Code of Military Justice? We basically repeated the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and they're saying that's in violation of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. It's absurd.
I hear you when you say that it is absurd and that it is almost comical, but also that it is intended to be intimidating. I do just have to ask you at a human level, Senator, you and your family have dealt with more than your fair share of sacrifice for this country and trial and tribulation. I just have to ask, even though I hear you when you say you're not intimidated, this must be a source of stress for you and your family. I just have to ask the kind of impact that it's having on you and your loved ones.
Rachel, I've had a missile blow up next to my airplane. I've been shot down, nearly shot down multiple times. I've flown a rocket ship into space 4 times, built by the lowest bidder. And my wife, Gabby Giffords, meeting with her constituents, shot in the head, 6 people killed around her. A horrific thing. She spent 6 months in the hospital. We know what political violence is, and we know what causes it, too. The statements that Donald Trump made is insightful, incites others. He's got millions of supporters. People listen to what he says more so than anybody else in the country. And he should be careful with his words. But I'm not going to be silenced here. Is it stressful? I've been stressed by, things more important than Donald Trump trying to intimidate me into shutting my mouth and not doing my job. He didn't like what I said. I'm going to show up for work every day, support the Constitution, do my job, hold this administration accountable, hold this president accountable when he is out of line. That's the responsibility of every U.S. Senator and every member of Congress. He's not going to silence us.
Claridad básica. El juramento es la Constitución, no a una persona. Intimidar desde arriba o desde estudios de televisión afines es la misma táctica. ¿Qué vemos en Epstein? Bueno, presionar, asustar, castigar filtraciones y frenar controles. Si se normaliza ahí se normaliza todo.
Donald Trump sigue convencido de que puede escapar de la realidad como quien se esconde detrás de un carrito de golf. Cree que si ordena dejar de hablar de los archivos de Epstein o asegura que los precios están bajando, todos vamos a sentir como si no existiera internet. Hoy volvió a huir de su campo de golf, su refugio favorito cuando las cosas se incendian. Pero esta vez la escapada salió pésima. El propio aparato propagandístico que siempre lo protegió, Fox, acaba de admitir que el desastre ya está en marcha. Renuncias internas, aliados virándose en su contra y un futuro electoral que se desploma.
The first of many. He called her a canary in the coal mine and said that congressional Republicans are, quote, going to get a lot of people retiring. Punchbowl News, run by Jake Sherman, who has excellent contacts in Congress, reports that Republicans believe they have no chance of winning the House of Representatives next year. That's what Republicans believe, and they blame 2 people. Donald Trump and Mike Johnson. Quote, a few other GOP members messaged us over the weekend saying that they too are considering retiring in the middle of the term. Here's one particularly exercised senior House Republican. Quote, this entire White House team has treated all members like garbage, all. And Mike Johnson has let it happen because he wanted it to happen. That is the sentiment of nearly all appropriators, authorizers, hawks, doves, rank and file. The arrogance of this White House team is off-putting to members who are run roughshod and threatened. They don't even allow little wins like announcing small grants or even responding from agencies. Not even the high profile, the regular rank and file, random members are more upset than ever. Members know they are going into the minority after the midterms. More explosive early resignations are coming. It's a tinderbox. Morale has never been lower. Mike Johnson will be stripped of his gavel, and they will lose the majority before this term is out. That's not a reporter summarizing what the reporter has found. That is a senior House Republican putting it in writing, in a text, saying members know they are going into the minority after the midterms. It's a tinderbox. Morale has never been lower. Mike Johnson will be stripped of his gavel. In other words, the senior House Republican who wrote that is a rational politician who can see that insane policies that hurt voters will hurt the party supporting those policies. You do bad things in government and you lose elections. And what that senior House Republican is saying is that virtually all House Republicans know this. The senior members, the junior members. And that's why it's a tinderbox. What they need to turn the tinderbox into a functioning congressional party is for a calming, steady leader.
Esto ya no es un pronóstico, es el parte oficial de hundimiento. El propio partido de Trump reconoce que se dirigen directo a perder el poder, incluso más fuerte de lo que ocurrió en 2018. Y lo más grave para él no es solo esa caída electoral, sino la desobediencia abierta dentro de las filas MAGA. Ya no le temen. Ya no ven sus amenazas como algo capaz de arruinarle la carrera y por eso renuncian, se van o directamente se deslindan de él. Y hablando de esa fractura interna, pasemos al siguiente episodio de esta caída en cadena. El intento fallido de Trump por renombrar su propia base mientras Fox empieza a romper el silencio. Ahí está la confirmación. Trump no solo está perdiendo elecciones, está perdiendo el control y cuando un movimiento político deja de temerle a su jefe, ese jefe deja de existir políticamente. La desbandada republicana no es casualidad, es instinto de supervivencia. Y mientras su coalición se desmorona, su gobierno también se cae a pedazos. Lo que pasa es que dentro del gabinete del presidente no tiene precedentes. Vamos a ver lo que revelaron sobre el caos interno en la Casa Blanca. Este es el cuadro completo. Un presidente que huye del golf mientras su partido se quiebra. Su gabinete hace el ridículo y sus propias investigaciones se derrumban por torpeza. MAGA ya no es un bloque indisciplinado, es una fuga masiva de quienes no quieren hundirse con él. Y antes de cerrar, prepárense, porque el próximo fragmento que viene deja aún más claro el nivel de desesperación dentro del círculo íntimo de Trump.
That this is the same Sean Duffy who just scrapped a Biden-era proposal to compensate travelers for flight disruptions. But hey, maybe you'll feel better about paying out of pocket for the airline's mistakes if you're doing it in a nice dress and some tasteful pumps. I bet you would. But I've got to say, I mean, compared to some of Trump's other cabinet secretaries, of which there are many doing weird stuff, Duffy almost seems like a problem solver. I mean, just consider Trump's Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent. Right now, he also, to be fair, has a lot on his plate. Trump's tariff policy disaster, all those deals Trump promised haven't really come to fruition. Prices are up, housing costs are up, healthcare costs are about to go way up for a lot of people. And voters continue to signal that they are unhappy with the way this administration has handled the affordability crisis. But don't worry, because Scott Bessent also has a plan.
You know the best way to bring your inflation rate down? Move from a blue state to a red state. Blue state inflation is 0.5% higher.
Of course. Struggling with the high cost of living? Just move. Quit your job. Pack up your family. Go find a new home when prices are at an all-time high. Should be easy. Do all that and your rising cost of living could go down by as much as, what was it again, Scott? 0.5%. Okay. Then there's Trump's Secretary of Health and Human Services, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. The man in charge of our nation's health has been hard at work recently, been doing a lot, making the CDC update its website with new warnings like this one. The claim vaccines do not cause autism is not an evidence-based claim, and studies supporting a link between vaccines and autism have been ignored by health authorities, which at this point is exactly the kind of anti-science propaganda we've come to expect from RFK Jr. Not a surprise, right? But what we maybe did not expect is everything else we are learning about RFK Jr. recently. I mean, last year we learned that RFK Jr. was allegedly engaged in some kind of an affair with a political reporter 39 years younger than him. Secretary Kennedy has denied the affair claims, saying they only met once for an interview. But now that reporter has written a book revealing what she says are new details about RFK Jr.'s personal life. According to the New York Times reporting on that book, she writes that despite RFK Jr.'s claim that he has been sober for decades, he still uses psychedelics and even smoked DMT, the powerful drug on which people have what feel like near-death experiences. Okay, I'm just gonna resist here the urge to make a transition involving sobriety and just ask, what is Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth up to these days, you may ask? Well, the man currently in charge of the world's largest military is currently spending his working days ordering an investigation into Democratic Senator Mark Kelly over Kelly's participation in a social media video reminding members of the armed forces that they do not have to follow illegal orders. A truth. Yesterday, Senator Kelly responded to the news of this investigation, posting this photo of the numerous medals he was awarded for his service in the Navy, which in turn prompted the Defense Secretary to launch a new attack over all things whether or not Kelly displayed his medals in the right order. Hegseth told the senator, quote, when, if you are recalled to active duty, it'll start with a uniform inspection. Now, this is very cringy already, but what makes this even more cringeworthy is that as a captain in the Navy, Senator Kelly outranked Pete Hegseth in that uniform. So it's kind of hilarious that an Army major who served 5 years on active duty with the National Guard is correcting a retired Navy captain who served for more than 20. But I digress. And now even some Republicans are admitting this whole thing is just completely ridiculous. Today, Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski posted on X, quote, the Department of Defense and FBI surely have more important priorities than this frivolous investigation. Look, none of the people Trump chose to be part of his administration are exactly killing it these days. But there is perhaps nowhere in Trump's administration suffering more embarrassment than the Department of Justice. I mean, in just the past week, we learned that Lindsay Halligan, Trump's handpicked prosecutor leading the investigations into two of his rivals, made critical mistakes that jeopardized their entire case against former FBI Director James Comey. Then we got a ruling from a judge that just yesterday, actually, saying that actually none of that may matter because the Trump administration never properly appointed Halligan in the first place. So the cases she brought against James Comey and Letitia James have been dismissed. Now, at the same time, we learned that Trump's Department of Justice is now investigating two Trump officials for potentially violating the law during their investigation into Trump's other rival, Adam Schiff. There's perhaps nothing more important to Trump, nothing, in his second term than his revenge tour against those rivals. But somehow, those prosecutions have become the biggest example of incompetence we have seen from an administration staffed by some of the most...
Lo que hay alrededor del presidente en este momento es inestabilidad pura, renuncias, caos gubernamental, contradicciones públicas y un gabinete que genera vergüenza internacional y una estrategia electoral que se deshace entre sus manos. Si este es el liderazgo que intenta imponer, su caída será mucho más profunda que cualquier derrota legislativa. Esto es Rumor de Estado. Donald Trump creyó que podía apagar este incendio mintiendo con descaro, que bastaba con posar como defensor de la transparencia, levantar la mano diciendo que apoya la publicación de los archivos Epstein y listo, todo mirando hacia otro lado. Pero resulta que el presidente subestimó a todo el mundo, porque lo que vemos hoy no es un gesto de honestidad, es un intento desesperado por tapar un encubrimiento que ya se les está derrumbando encima. Y lo peor es que hay algo nuevo, correos filtrados que muestran que dentro del propio FBI se estaba limpiando el terreno para proteger a Donald Trump. Sí, exactamente lo que temías. Redacciones direccionadas, nombres borrados y agentes trabajando horas extras para asegurarse de que ciertos vínculos nunca vieran la luz. Y antes de entrar en el escándalo de los correos filtrados, empecemos con que el presidente prepara como siguiente movimiento para disculparse, para blindarse, un posible perdón presidencial a Ghislaine Maxwell. Sí, lo escucharon bien.
Conspirator of Donald Trump's closest friend, Jeffrey Epstein, made a joke about pardons today. The man who seems to want to pardon Ghislaine Maxwell after she was convicted of luring young girls into the home of a rapist and sex trafficker who ruined their lives, made a joke about pardons today. And he told us the two people who he would never pardon, and those two people are not his old friends, Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein.
The turkeys being pardoned today go by the names of Gobble and Waddle. When I first saw their pictures, I thought we should send them, I shouldn't say this. I was going to call them Chuck and Nancy. But then I realized I wouldn't be pardoning them. I would never pardon those two people.
But he seems to want to pardon Ghislaine Maxwell. He would never pardon those two people, but he seems to want to pardon her. He would pardon Ghislaine Maxwell because she said to Donald Trump's criminal defense lawyer, who is now his deputy attorney general, that she never saw Donald Trump do anything wrong. Why is Ghislaine Maxwell now afraid of saying that same thing under oath in a congressional hearing? Ghislaine Maxwell's criminal defense lawyers have told the House Oversight Committee that she will take the Fifth Amendment in answer to every question if they subpoena her testimony. That means if a member of Congress asks Ghislaine Maxwell, did you ever see Donald Trump do anything wrong? She will not answer that question under oath now. She will take the Fifth Amendment. And so someone who will not make the same statement under oath to Congress that she has already made to Donald Trump's criminal defense lawyer is someone who just might have been lying to Donald Trump's criminal defense lawyer, who's now his deputy attorney general. It may be that most of what Ghislaine Maxwell said to Donald Trump's deputy attorney general was a lie. That's why she won't repeat any of it, not a word, under oath in testimony to Congress. If Ghislaine Maxwell commits perjury under oath testifying to Congress, the next Democratic administration would prosecute her for that crime.
Y aquí está el verdadero punto. Lo más explosivo de los archivos Epstein no es lo que aparece, es lo que no aparece, lo que hace falta, lo que alguien se encargó de que no quedara registrado. Ghislaine Maxwell es el eslabón que jamás escribió, jamás fotografió y jamás envió por correo ciertas cosas que sí recuerda. Y eso, precisamente eso, es lo que Trump intenta mantener enterrado. Mientras la herencia de Epstein ha cumplido con las entregas, Maxwell hace lo contrario. Silencio absoluto. Y antes de llegar a los correos filtrados, vayamos un segundo al director del FBI, que acaba de ser desmentido públicamente por la administración del patrimonio de Epstein. Aquí está lo esencial. El FBI no estaba intentando revelar la verdad, estaba preparando un cortafuegos para Trump. Los correos filtrados muestran agentes reubicados, pagos masivos en horas extras y protocolos de revisión donde el objetivo era claro: sacar el nombre del presidente de cualquier documento incómodo. Fotos de allanamiento, videos de vigilancia, material aéreo, listas, registros, todo pasado por un filtro que, según los propios testimonios filtrados, debía eliminar cualquier referencia al mandatario antes de la publicación. Mientras el FBI decía transparencia, lo que decía era borrar huellas. Mientras Trump finge indignación contra figuras como Bill Clinton o Larry Summers, intenta que no notemos lo obvio. Él contrató a esas personas para protegerlo, no para investigar nada. Ahora, con Kash Patel acorralado, podría sacrificarlo para fingir limpieza, pero esta no es la única muestra del nivel de incompetencia y delirio en su gabinete. Y ahí es donde entra lo siguiente. Jen Psaki lo expuso sin piedad.
Donald Trump has been humiliated a lot lately. I mean, a lot. And most of the time, that is because of his own behavior. He's really done it to himself. No one made him fall asleep in the Oval Office, for example. But it's also because he's surrounded himself with people like this. I mean, those are two of Donald Trump's top law enforcement officials, right there, featured in that picture. That's Kristi Noem in those super stylish glasses on her red carpet, and her red carpet sidekick, Kash Patel, spending their weekend hanging out in a pink Lego race car while attending a Formula One race in Las Vegas. Now, you would be hard-pressed, very, very hard-pressed, to find an example of a previous FBI director or DHS secretary, never mind together, in any comparable photos. And if this was a one-off incident, you might forgive them for having kind of, a little bit of fun after their rigors of their very important day jobs. But for Trump's cabinet, living like a C-list celebrity is the job. And no one seems to do it better than Kash Patel. Because the FBI director has been using federal resources for a lot of trips that don't sound at all FBI related. I mean, he has repeatedly used a government jet for recreational travel, including a golf trip with friends at a private island in Scotland, for example. Doesn't sound FBI related. That's not to mention his use of a government plane to attend a wrestling event in Pennsylvania, as well as a getaway to a Texas hunting resort called the Boondoggle Ranch. I mean, of all hunting resorts, Kash Patel could have visited the Boondoggle Ranch. Now, on top of all of that, Patel has also redirected SWAT team agents from critical duties, presumably like responding to actual emergencies, to serve as the personal security detail for his 27-year-old girlfriend. You can see a picture there right there on your screen. And now his headline-obsessed boss, Donald Trump, is reportedly having second thoughts about choosing him to lead the country's top law enforcement agency. MS Now reported today that Trump is considering removing Kash Patel as FBI director in the coming months, as he and his top aides have grown increasingly frustrated by the unflattering headlines Patel has recently generated, according to 3 people with knowledge of the situation. Now, if that were to happen, Patel would have had the shortest tenure of any confirmed FBI director in history, making it through only about a year of what is supposed to be a 10-year term that spans multiple presidencies. And this is how the White House decided to try and push back on that reporting. A spokesperson told MS Now, quote, President Trump has assembled the most talented and impressive administration in history, and they are doing an excellent job carrying out the president's agenda. FBI Director Patel is a critical member of the president's team, and he is working tirelessly to restore integrity to the FBI. He seemed like he was working tirelessly in those photos. Now, I will tell you, I know from experience that when the White House statement is any version of the president has confidence in, or this cabinet member is a part of a great overall team, just look at the whole team, it isn't typically a very good sign. But she really left us an opening there with that statement, and it got us wondering, what are the other members of the most talented and impressive administration in history up to these days? Well, let's start with the other member of Kash Patel's pit crew, DHS Secretary Kristi Noem. Now, when she isn't spending her days playing cowgirl dress-up or riding around in Lego cars, Noem has been facing considerable scrutiny over reports that DHS funneled hundreds of millions of tax.
Lo que acabamos de ver muestra algo clave. Trump no dirige un gobierno, dirige un club de autopromoción. Funcionarios posando en pistas de carreras usando jets oficiales como si fueran taxis privados y desvían agentes tácticos para proteger novias, amigos, eventos sociales, mientras los archivos de Epstein eran editados a contrarreloj para sacar a Trump del escándalo en su centro. Esto es rumor de Estado. Lo que los grandes medios se negaron a decir durante años acaba de estallarles en la cara. El presidente Donald Trump está en un derrumbe físico y mental que ya no pueden ocultar. No son rumores, no son exageraciones, no es polémica política. Es un presidente que apenas articula frases, confunde fechas y que pierde el hilo en público y que pasa más tiempo peleando con su propia sombra que gobernando. Y hoy, por primera vez en mucho tiempo, un gigante mediático, el New York Times, se atrevió a ponerlo por escrito. El resultado, Trump explotó en su red social y en medio del berrinche terminó admitiendo exactamente lo que lleva meses negando, que su deterioro es real.
Sharp mental and physical decline. And we now have a number for it. 39%. That is the measure of Donald Trump's physical decline since his first time in the White House. 39%. In an article published tonight by the New York Times, Katie Rogers and Dylan Friedman report under the headline, Shorter Days, Signs of Fatigue, Trump Faces Realities of Aging in Office. The Times has documented the newly abbreviated schedule for the struggling 79-year-old man. Quote, in 2017, the first year of his first term, Mr. Trump's scheduled events started at 10:31 a.m. on average. By contrast, Mr. Trump, in his second term, has started scheduled events in the afternoon, on average, at 12:08 p.m. His events end, on average, at around the same time as they did during the first year of his term, shortly after 5 p.m. The number of Mr. Trump's total official appearances has decreased by 39%. 39% less Donald Trump. That's what we're getting now. Donald Trump was the laziest president we had ever seen in his first term. He is now 39% lazier. And he is now apparently struggling with a 5-hour workday. And of course, none of us have seen him do anything that in any way meets the definition of work during those 5 hours. The Times reports Mr. Trump appeared to doze off during an event in the Oval Office. And so we are now covering the physical decline and fall of Donald Trump. Last night, I mentioned Donald Trump's age a couple of times when I pointed out that you can see the 79-year-old man who gets very little sleep bewildered about how he is losing his grip on the Republican Party. And there are people who are in full-blown dementia in their early 60s. We all age differently, and Donald Trump is aging just fine for someone who should be watching TV all day and playing golf occasionally, but he's aging terribly for a president. But Donald Trump at his best age would have been the stupidest president and most incompetent president in history and the most corrupt. A younger Donald Trump is not a better Donald Trump. Congressional Democrats have much to be thankful for this Thanksgiving, but next Thanksgiving, they will have much more to be thankful for. At least Republicans believe that, because next Thanksgiving, Republicans believe Hakeem Jeffries will be waiting to be sworn.
O'Donnell no está diciendo nada que quienes seguimos la política estadounidense no hayamos visto venir. La diferencia es que él sí se atreve a decirlo mientras otros medios siguen tratando al presidente como si fuera un señor perfectamente funcional y no como un político que ya ni consigue mantenerse despierto en actos oficiales. Ese 39% menos Trump no es un número más. Es la prueba de que su propio círculo ha reducido su exposición pública para evitar que sus lapsos mentales queden grabados. Y aquí es donde entra lo verdaderamente peligroso. Un presidente debilitado es un presidente manejable. Y cuando Trump está más confundido, es más fácil para actores externos como Rusia y sus operadores políticos empujarlo hacia decisiones que nadie en su sano juicio firmaría. Pero antes de entrar a ese riesgo geopolítico, vamos a pasar al siguiente punto. El ataque emocional y desordenado que Trump lanzó esta mañana para defenderse del reportaje. Lo que acabamos de ver no es una respuesta política, es un grito de auxilio. Trump dice que trabaja más que nunca, pero ni su propio equipo logra mantenerle un horario de adulto funcional. Dice que tiene la energía de siempre, pero admite que llegará un momento en que todo se le caiga encima. Ese no es ahora, que escribió. Suena exactamente como alguien tratando de convencerse a sí mismo. Y mientras él intenta ocultar su declive, su partido lo siente. Su figura es tan débil que ya no hablan de abandonarlo, hablan de renunciar, de no votar nada que él pida. Marjorie Taylor Greene, su defensora más fanática, renunció solo para tener más tiempo libre y dedicarlo a sacarlo, cuando hasta sus devotos prefieren destruirle a defenderle. Ya no está en control, está en caída libre. Y aún así, Trump sigue usando las instituciones como arma: intimidación política, amenazas disfrazadas, presiones desde el Pentágono, el Departamento de Educación, todo para callar a quienes se atrevan a decir lo evidente, que está perdiendo la capacidad de gobernar. Pasemos al siguiente clip, donde Adam Schiff expone con claridad cómo Trump está usando el aparato estatal para intimidar al Congreso.
The FBI is trying to arrange interviews with each of your colleagues in that video. Should they agree to those interviews? There's nothing forcing them to do that.
Well, I leave it to them to decide how they want to handle this, but this is plainly intended to try to intimidate them. We have the astonishing situation where the president, the Pentagon are saying that if you state the law, if you state what the Constitution provides, that's how somehow going to subject you to investigation, prosecution for sedition, court-martialing. It's absurd. But the whole point of it is also a dangerous effort to try to silence and intimidate. And I can tell you, knowing all of these six who made that video, they are not about to be silenced or intimidated. They have faced far greater in their careers than these idle threats from the president or the Pentagon. But nevertheless, it's, part of the abuse of the Justice Department to go after the president's enemies. He's now abusing the Pentagon to go after his enemies. He's abusing the FCC to go after his critics in late-night comedy. He's using the Department of Education to go after his critics at universities. This is a broad societal effort to silence and intimidate the opposition. It's what dictators do, and I'm just so proud of the patriotism of my colleagues, Mark Kelly, Alyssa Slotkin, two of our most respected colleagues. I think all of us in the Democratic caucus feeling an enormous sense of pride in them and support for them.
So the FBI, prior to Donald Trump's inauguration, was engaged in serious work every day. There's certainly a dozen minimum FBI agents now who've been dragged off, probably a couple of dozen, dragged off whatever they were doing to go talk to members of Congress about something they said publicly. They could just sit in their FBI offices and study the video. It's all there.
That's exactly right. And that's why this is all about intimidation. It's not a serious investigation. There's no court or court-martial in the world that would find fault, I think, with my colleagues for stating the obvious, for stating the law. But, you know, it's designed to set a chilling effect. It's designed not only to chill these particular members, but to send a message to other members of Congress, House or Senate, that you got to watch what you say because you'll be investigated. You could be threatened with prosecution. You might have to retain counsel. We will essentially, put you through the ringer if you dare stand up to this president. But, I could tell you, my colleagues and I feel this only stiffens our resolve to stand prouder, stand stronger, push back harder against this lawless administration.
Senator Adam Schiff, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Lo que explica Schiff confirma que el problema ya no es solo el deterioro físico y mental de Trump, es que ese deterioro está alimentando conductas autoritarias. Un presidente que se siente débil responde tratando de aplastar a quienes no pueden convencer. Cuando un mandatario necesita al FBI para amedrantar a congresistas que simplemente citaron la Constitución, ya no estamos discutiendo política. Esto es rumor de Estado. MAGA ya no es un simple fanatismo político. Es una confrontación directa de las consecuencias reales de haber puesto a Donald Trump en la Casa Blanca. Aplauden cada abuso del gobierno, hasta el abuso los alcanza a ellos. Bendicen las redadas hasta que ICE toca la puerta equivocada. Celebran la mano dura hasta que la mano les cae por encima. Y hoy, la historia le explotó en la cara a alguien que jamás pensó que ese aparato violento la alcanzaría. Caroline Leavitt, la vocera del presidente Trump, con un familiar detenido por los mismos agentes que ella defiende con devoción casi religiosa.
Jessica, 2 million in 1 year are gone. So according to my calculations, that will be 8 million by the end of this term.
It won't be.
So when you get rid of 8 million illegals, you know what happens? Crime goes down. Rent goes down. Health insurance goes down. Car insurance goes down. Those things
aren't happening.
Okay, we're just getting started, Jessica.
Oh, okay.
It's supply and demand. What do you think is going to happen when you get 8 million?
At least we're getting started, Jessica. You guys didn't do crap.
That's not true.
It lowers everything. That means
deporting more
classrooms
people.
get lighter. That means everything goes down, Jessica. Wages go up, crime goes down. It's very simple. Even you can...
Lo que acabamos de ver es el manual de MAGA en acción. Hombres gritando cifras inventadas, teorías económicas dignas de un panfleto de conspiración y la misma obsesión de siempre con culpar a inmigrantes de todos los males del país. Mientras tanto, los guardianes de la ley enviados por Trump no están bajo la criminalidad. Están llenando comunidades de terror y usando gases contra familia cuya amenaza es existir siendo morenas o pobres. Estos tipos no son héroes, son militantes armados intentando validar su masculinidad perdida, intimando a quien se cruce. Y aquí viene alguien que lo dijo sin anestesia, la congresista Jasmine Crockett.
Telling you that they are doing just the opposite. I am telling you that we are a land of immigrants. It is time to do immigration right. It is time to make sure that we live up to the promise of this country. The idea that someone ran and said that I will get rid of the bad guys, yet we know more than 50% of the people that are currently being detained in custody have no criminal records at all. Zero, nada. So tell me why you are taking those people out of their communities. They are our neighbors, they are our friends, and frankly, they contribute to the fabric of this country. They are what make this country great, not your thuggish ICE agents who literally are spitting on our Constitution, as well as everything that we think patriotism ought to be. So with that, I want you to know, whether you are in Los Angeles, whether you are in Chicago, whether you are in any city in North Carolina, let me be clear. Democrats, specifically on the Oversight Committee, we got your back. I want you to know that this is about doing what's right. This isn't right or left for us. This is right or wrong. And I am telling you right now, this administration
Crockett no exagera. Lo que describe es la esencia misma de este aparato, un cuerpo armado que opera con el permiso personal del presidente, seleccionando comunidades enteras como blanco militar. Y mientras tanto, la propia Caroline Leavitt hace días corría desesperada a la televisión para convencer a la base MAGA de que Trump no se había enamorado del nuevo alcalde de Nueva York, como si eso fuera la prioridad del país. Pero ahora viene el golpe de realidad, porque ese mismo ICE que Leavitt defiende, justifica y aplaude, acaba de detener a la madre de su propio sobrino. Ahí lo tienen. Caroline Leavitt presenta en público como orden y seguridad lo que le acaba de arrancar a un familiar político del entorno inmediato. Y claro, ahora aparece la declaración de siempre: no hablan hace años, no viven juntos, no es tan cercana. Todo para evitar admitir lo obvio. Las políticas que defienden pueden destruir vidas, incluyendo los tuyos. MAGA pensó que la dureza del gobierno nunca los alcanzaría porque ellos son supuestamente los buenos, pero la verdad es simple: Trump solo protege a los millonarios porque los financia. El resto, incluso sus seguidores, son daños colaterales. Y para colmo, la propia Caroline arrastra sus propios escándalos financieros, deudas de campaña, préstamos sin pagar, contratos congelados. Pero tranquila, la FAC no la toca porque Trump la dejó inservible para la corrupción que se maneje dentro del club como privado.
Committee and a former federal prosecutor. Senator Schiff, what normally happens with this kind of cash in undercover operations like this run by the FBI?
Well, there would be a follow-up if there's a prosecution where you would make sure that the money was retained so you could enter it into evidence during a trial. Sometimes the $50,000 might be in marked bills. I remember working on a case involving corrupt LA sheriffs way back in the day when I was a prosecutor, and it involved marked bills that were later found sequestered within the drywall in this deputy sheriff's home. So you want to be able to prove that you provided the money. Now, if you've got video of it or audio of it, you may not need marked bills, but it's an important part of the evidence. But also here, where the Justice Department dismissed the case for reasons it's never made clear, the question is, did they ever get the money back, or did he just get this $50,000 bribe gift from the FBI? And we should be able to get answers from the Attorney General on that, or the Director of the FBI. But that requires that Republicans join us in doing serious oversight. That requires the Judiciary Committee demand on a bipartisan basis answers to those very basic questions. They haven't been willing to do that. So Senator Whitehouse, Senator Blumenthal, and myself have now made these FOIA, Freedom of Information Act requests. My experience in the first Trump administration, when they likewise stonewalled oversight, is sometimes FOIA is a quicker process to get answers because you can go to court to enforce them than even congressional oversight, particularly here where Republicans aren't willing to do it.
Senator, one of the answers that the Attorney General could have given to Senator Whitehouse's question about this is it never happened. There was no FBI undercover operation investigating Tom Homan. There is no video of him accepting $50,000, and so there is no $50,000 to talk about. That's an available answer if it's true.
That's absolutely true. That's absolutely right. Another available answer is we will get you that information. We will provide that to this committee. If there is an audio or videotape, we will turn it over. We will let you know whether he paid taxes on this. If he kept the money, we will give you those answers. That, too, would be acceptable if she actually didn't know the answers. Now, I think she does know the answers. If you played a little more of that tape, you would have seen what she did with respect to just about everyone on the committee, which is when she got questions she didn't like, she turned to personal attacks on the different senators. But yes, you're absolutely right. She could have made a denial. Even Tom Homan, when he was originally asked about this on Fox, didn't deny getting the cash. He was willing to say he didn't believe he did anything illegal, but he didn't rule out getting the cash.
Senator Schiff, we have to squeeze in a commercial break. When we come back, I'd like to discuss Donald Trump using the FBI now to try to investigate members of Congress for simply reciting the law publicly. Senator Adam Schiff is back with us. Senator, we have reports indicating that the FBI is trying to arrange interviews with each of your colleagues in that video. Should they agree to those interviews? There's nothing forcing them to do that.
Well, I leave it to them to decide how they want to handle this, but this is plainly intended to try to intimidate them. We have the astonishing situation where the president, the Pentagon are saying that if you state the law, if you state what the Constitution provides, that's how somehow going to subject you to investigation, prosecution for sedition,
Schiff
court
lo
martial.
describe como precisión quirúrgica. En este gobierno, los aliados de Trump pueden aceptar fajos de dineros en bolsa, evadir impuestos, perder evidencia, bloquear investigaciones y nada pasa. El presidente no solo protege esa corrupción, la multiplica. Y ahora hasta pretende usar al FBI para intimidar a los congresistas que simplemente leen la ley en voz alta. Esto es Rumor de Estado. Pensé que ya nada podía sorprenderme del presidente Donald Trump, pero aquí estamos, una vez más, viendo cómo supera su propio récord de cinismo. Ya sabemos que repite al pie de la letra lo que diga Putin, ya sabemos que se comunica con Moscú como si fuera la sucursal de un banco, todo lo que esperábamos. Pero lo que no esperábamos era verlo esta noche admitiendo todo sin pestañear, y lo hace porque cree que nadie va a cuestionarlo, hasta que un reportero lo hizo y Trump simplemente se derrumbó en cámara.
Plan the best. Don't give any money to the insurance companies. Give it to the people directly. Let them go out and buy their own health care plan. And we're looking at that. If that can work, we're looking at that. That's sort of take it off. That's what I like. Don't give the money to the insurance companies. They go out and buy their own plan. You give the money to the people. I like it the best.
Are you planning to extend those subsidies?
I'd rather not. Somebody said I want to extend them for 2 years. I don't want to extend them for 2 years. I'd rather not extend them at all. And maybe some kind of an extension may be necessary to get something else done, because the Unaffordable Care Act has been a disaster. It's a disaster. And I said it was when it first got put in. Unfortunately, we lost a couple of Republican votes, and the Democrats voted for it. It's a Democrat plan. And the premiums are going up, and it's the Democrats' fault. But, you know, they are negotiating with me. It's very interesting. They want to see something happen.
Who are you talking to on the Democrat
side?
side?
But we have a lot of Democrats want this plan to happen. They would love to see the money go to the people and the people go out and get their own health care.
Lo de siempre, Trump intentando vender un plan de salud que jamás existió, jamás existirá y que únicamente menciona para no reconocer que no tiene absolutamente nada que ofrecer. Lo más absurdo es escucharlo decir que no quiere extender subsidios porque eso sería admitir que el programa funciona, y él prefiere que millones queden en el aire con tal de inflar el ego. Y ojo, hay republicanos que sí quieren extender esos subsidios, pero no por humanidad. Esa palabra no existe en su vocabulario, sino porque saben que los próximos comicios se les vienen como una avalancha. Y ni siquiera así logran convencer al presidente, que insiste en vender su fantasía llamada Trump Care. Eso sería un desastre por sí solo, pero en política nada viene aislado, porque inmediatamente después de Trump pasó a presumir otro logro, una llamada internacional viene salida del horno.
I also had a very good talk with President Xi of China, and I think that part of the world is doing fine.
Can you tell us about the content of your talks?
Mostly trade. I spoke to President Xi about a lot of things, but trade and buying our farm products, and he said, he agreed with me. I think he's gonna very much surprise you on the upside. I think I asked him, I'd like you to buy it a little faster. I'd like you to buy more, and he's more or less agreed to do that. I think we will be pleasantly surprised by the actions of President Xi. I have a good relationship, great relationship with him. I like him, he likes me. I'm going to be going there in April. I guess you'll all be going with me, but I'm going to be going to China in April. With Japan, likewise, I just came back from Japan, and we have a great relationship. The new Prime Minister and myself, she's very smart, she's very strong, and she's going to be a great leader. Thank you very much.
Ahí lo tienen. Trump, el salvador eterno de los agricultores en su propia cabeza, presume llamadas que nadie escuchó, acuerdos que nadie vio y promesas que jamás se cumplen. Todo suena igual. Él es brillante, lo aman en todo el mundo y cualquier cosa que diga debe aceptarse como verdad divina. Pero incluso estas fanfarronadas se quedan cortas frente a lo que se viene. Porque lo más grave no es esta noche Japón, ni China, ni los agricultores, es Rusia. Antes de continuar, un contexto rápido. Steve Witkoff, uno de los hombres que orbitan la presidencia, fue grabado instruyendo a funcionarios rusos sobre cómo lograr que Trump les dé lo que quieren. Una clase magistral sobre cómo manipular al presidente de Estados Unidos. Y ahí va el clip de Trump siendo confrontado por ese escándalo.
They're losing too many people.
Have you heard this audio that Bloomberg has of Witkoff coaching
the Russians on how to appeal to you?
Well, I haven't heard it, no, but that's a standard thing, you know, because he's got to sell this to Ukraine. He's got to sell Ukraine to Russia. That's what a deal maker does. You got to say, look, they want this. You got to convince them with this. You know, that's a very standard form of negotiation. I haven't heard it, but I heard it was standard negotiation. And I would imagine he's saying the same thing to Ukraine, because each party has to give and take.
So you're not worried that he's too pro-Russian?
No, I think, look, this war could go on for years, and Russia's got a lot more people, got a lot more soldiers, you know. So I think if Ukraine can make a deal, it's a good thing. I think it's great for both. Frankly, I think it's great for both. But Ukraine's got it's a much smaller group of people.
Witkoff, que recordemos tiene intereses financieros junto a los hijos del presidente, explica a Rusia cómo seducir políticamente a Trump, para luego avanzar a un acuerdo que favorezca a Moscú. No es estándar, es peligroso, es indignante. Y es exactamente lo que Trump considera normal porque responde a su mayoría de debilidad, el halago. Trump no quiere diplomacia, no quiere estrategia, no quiere resolver guerras. Trump quiere adoración y quien lo alimente gana acceso. Por eso carga los bolsillos de su círculo cercano con negocios extranjeros, criptomonedas basura y cualquier cosa que genere ingresos mientras él ocupa la Casa Blanca. Por eso acepta regalos absurdos, tratos turbios y espectáculos ridículos durante sus visitas oficiales. Y por eso, cuando un operador suyo entrena a Rusia sobre cómo manejar al presidente, él lo describe como algo normal. Para él lo es. Para el resto del mundo es una amenaza. Y eso explica el seguimiento del reportero. Presidente, ¿por qué le gusta tanto Rusia? Y la respuesta es porque Rusia lo halaga, nada más. Y la cosa no termina ahí, porque no solo gobiernos extranjeros explotan esa debilidad, también su propio gabinete. Entre ellos para ver quién lo halaga mejor, incluso si eso significa corromper procesos militares.
Marshal in his uniform to humiliate him and ideally to imprison him. The decorated veteran / sitting U.S. senator. And the White House is more than happy to publicly put its finger on the scale of this supposedly impartial military investigation.
The White House is supportive of the Department of War's investigation into Senator Mark Kelly, and I think what Senator Mark Kelly was actually trying to do was intimidate the 1.3 million active duty service members who are currently serving in our United States Armed Forces with that video that he and his Democrat colleagues put out.
If that is too subtle of a message for you, here was the Secretary of Defense literally going after Kelly on social media. Quote, "So, Captain Kelly, not only did your sedition video intentionally undercut good order and discipline, but you can't even display your uniform correctly. Your medals are out of order and rows reversed. When, if you're recalled to active duty, I'll start with a uniform inspection." While nitpicking, Hegseth failed to note that several of Kelly's medals were for valor in battle. And as Punchbowl News points out, Hegseth's posts will almost certainly raise questions of so-called unlawful command influence over the military judicial process. You see, in the military, where you, of course, have to follow orders, right, there are laws against commanders trying to influence criminal proceedings. Hegseth is picking public fights with Kelly in ways that make clear what the Commander-in-Chief and Defense Secretary want. That is a clear...
Aquí ya cruzamos una línea grave. Usar al Departamento de Guerra y al Secretario de Defensa para intimidar a un senador veterano, corregirle el uniforme en redes sociales y dejar claro que la orden viene desde arriba. Esto no es un error, no es exceso, es un mensaje diciendo obedece o te destruimos. El presidente no gobierna como líder, gobierna como alguien obsesionado por el control, necesitado de aplausos y rodeado de funcionarios que compiten para ofrecerle espectáculo. Esto es Rumor de Estado. Hoy, en Rumor de Estado, lo que estamos viendo ya no es una simple contradicción, es la confirmación de que el presidente Donald Trump desprecia al país que dice defender. Y sí, lo voy a mencionar debido a que esta es la base de todo lo que veremos hoy. Trump no solo desprecia a las instituciones, desprecia a los militares, a los trabajadores estadounidenses, él desprecia a Estados Unidos. Y lo más interesante es que hasta dentro de MAGA están empezando a darse cuenta. El quiebre está ahí. Y lo que pasó con Caroline Leavitt es apenas el síntoma más reciente de esa fractura.
You should not obey unlawful orders that actually your sworn duty is to the Constitution, not to a commander who's asking you to do illegal things. We've talked about this now 3 days in a row. So 3 days in a row, I'm going to say it would have been more ideal if there was specificity about the type of orders that you are hearing from lower ranking officers that they're concerned about. So if that's Venezuelan boat strikes, like why did General Halsey resign from the Southern Command?
You don't know.
But that's why I said why. It's in the form of a question. You're right. He just wanted to spend more time with his family.
You don't know if people are even...
Leave his family out of it, Jessica.
Don't make me talk about Todd Starnes. Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump addressing that meeting of generals and saying, you're going to have to help us clean up these blue cities, those kinds of things. But to Greg's point about, you shouldn't be elevating these people. They are doing exactly the wrong thing in Greg Gutfeld's mind, because now the face of the Democratic Party is Mark Kelly. It's not Zohran Mamdani. You have Donald Trump smiling at Mamdani, and you have Mark Kelly, who's a decorated veteran, who is married to basically like the equivalent of an American saint in Gabby Giffords, who's won a purple state, has hugely high favorabilities, and now people are talking about the fact that the Democratic Party is represented by a guy like that. I'm personally thrilled. That is what my party is, the party of Mark Kelly's out there.
So this was a political move.
No, it's just a nice afterthought that we're getting a bounce out of it, right?
You're getting a bounce out of this? You look exhausted talking about it 3 days in a row. And you're complaining you have to do an FBI interview, which if
I'm not complaining.
Truthful, you might have to go to prison.
Pete Hegseth is spending his days melting down online instead of being over in the UAE negotiating peace between Ukraine and Russia. The Secretary of the Army is the one doing that. Pete's saying, I think your medals are in the wrong order, even though it's supposed to be a mirror image or something I read on the internet. I don't know. I'm not a veteran. But I'm just saying that I doubt that Mark Kelly, a guy who's even gone to space, 4 times, knows which way.
Ahí está, la esencia del problema. Trump exige lealtad personal, no compromiso con la Constitución. Para él, un soldado solo sirve si le obedece incluso cuando lo que ordena es ilegal. Eso no es liderazgo, es servilismo autoritario. Y lo más revelador es cómo MAGA se incomoda cuando alguien, como Jessica Tarlov, les obliga a mirarse en el espejo. Pero esto apenas es el inicio. Antes de pasar al siguiente clip, vamos a ver cómo Trump también desprecia a los trabajadores estadounidenses. Y cómo ese desprecio dejó a Caroline Leavitt sin respuesta ante una pregunta que, en teoría, debería haber sido pan comido para el movimiento MAGA.
Visa thing will not be a big priority for your administration, because if you want to raise wages for American workers, you can't flood the country with tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of foreign workers.
You also do have to bring in talent. When
we have plenty of talented people here.
No, you don't.
We don't have talented people here?
No, you don't have certain talents, and people have to learn. You can't take people off an unemployment line and say, I'm going to put you into a factory where we're going to make missiles, or I'm going to put you into...
Este momento es clave. Trump ha pasado años demonizando a inmigrantes, asegurando que arruinan la economía, y ahora dice que el país no tiene suficiente talento. Es un golpe directo a quienes lo siguen creyendo que él defiende al trabajador promedio. Y lo que vimos ahí no es un desliz, es su visión real. La gente común no le importa. Y esa contradicción explotó cuando un reportero MAGA, exacto, MAGA, confrontó a Caroline Leavitt exigiéndole que explique cómo eso encaja con el supuesto proyecto pro trabajador.
Is it MAGA to support American workers being replaced with H-1B visa holders? Are Americans not capable of filling most of these positions?
Who supports getting American workers getting replaced?
I know the president mentioned that he wanted to bring in some workers that he could eventually send back in regards to...
The president does not support American workers being replaced. You are mischaracterizing what the president said. The president wants to see our American manufacturing industry be revitalized better than ever before. That's part of what he's doing with his effective use of tariffs and cutting good trade deals around the world. That's why he's recruited trillions and trillions of dollars in investments into our country. Those are creating good paying American jobs right here at home. As for the H-1B visa issue, the president has a very nuanced and common sense opinion on this issue. He wants to see if foreign companies are investing trillions of dollars in the United States of America and they're bringing foreign workers with them to create very niche things like batteries. He wants to see that at the beginning to get those manufacturing facilities and those factories up and running, but ultimately the president always wants to see American workers in those jobs, and he's told these foreign companies that are investing here, you better be hiring my people if you're going to be doing business in the United States. So there's been a lot of misunderstanding of the president's...
Ese momento es oro puro para analizar. MAGA está dividido porque Trump contradice su propio discurso. discurso, y figuras como Leavitt quedan atrapadas entre defender lo indefendible o admitir que el presidente gobierna para los multimillonarios, no para sus seguidores. El reportero ni siquiera estaba buscando atacar desde la izquierda, estaba repitiendo lo que MAGA ha dicho durante años, y Leavitt no pudo sostenerlo, porque no hay coherencia donde no hay principios. Antes del cierre, vamos a ver un clip más que resume este desastre, la cadena de derrotas políticas que Trump ha acumulado en cuestión de semanas, y cómo incluso analistas conservadores están admitiendo que su liderazgo está fracturándose.
L after L after L after L after L. This has been the month of L's for Donald Trump. Let's run through it all. The elections, first week, 2025 in Virginia and New Jersey. He knew he was going to lose them. He lost them by much greater margins than I think even Democrats expected. The shutdown message war. Sorry to be right about this, but that was a big L for Donald Trump. How do you know it was a big L for Donald Trump? Like, they are still splashing around trying to find a message on healthcare. I mean, like, just today, there's a bunch of news where Donald Trump was saying that he, was wanting to extend the Obamacare subsidies. The House Republicans don't like that. Senate Republicans don't like that. They're going to make an announcement today. They're backing it down. It seems like we're still 2 weeks away.
El patrón es evidente. Derrotas, confusión, improvisación y un movimiento que ya no sabe qué significa ser MAGA sin un líder capaz de mantener una línea política básica. Y como vimos en cada clip, todo proviene de lo mismo. Trump no cree en el país, no cree en su gente y no cree en nada que no sea su propio ego. Por eso, la división dentro del movimiento no es tan profunda, porque él nunca construyó un proyecto, solo culto a su figura. Lo que queda claro hoy es que Estados Unidos tiene un presidente que desprecia la esencia democrática del país, insulta a los militares, ridiculiza a los trabajadores y adapta su posición al empresario multimillonario que tenga más cerca. MAGA empieza a romperse porque por primera vez se enfrentan a algo que habían decidido ignorar, que Trump nunca tuvo una visión para ellos, no les ofreció un futuro, solo una fantasía, y cuando la fantasía se quiebra surge la pregunta que vimos repetirse en redes: ¿dónde está mi presidente? La respuesta es simple: está rodeado de multimillonarios, no de la gente que lo llevó al poder. Esto es Rumor de Estado. Hoy en Washington no hay calma, hay incendio. Y lo más revelador es que el presidente Trump ni siquiera está en la Casa Blanca para apagar nada, porque sabe que su propia gente está rompiendo filas. Renuncias, amenazas de despido, traiciones internas. MAGA está en una guerra consigo misma, y esa implosión le está explotando en la cara al presidente.
Said that congressional Republicans are, quote, going to get a lot of people retiring. Punchbowl News, run by Jake Sherman, who has excellent contacts in Congress, reports that Republicans believe they have no chance of winning the House of Representatives next year. That's what Republicans believe, and they blame two people: Donald Trump and Mike Johnson. Quote, a few other GOP members messaged us over the weekend saying that they too are considering retiring in the middle of the term. Here's one particularly exercised senior House Republican. Quote, this entire White House team has treated all members like garbage, all. And Mike Johnson has let it happen because he wanted it to happen. That is the sentiment of nearly all appropriators, authorizers, hawks, doves, rank and file. The arrogance of this White House team is off-putting to members who are run roughshod and threatened. They don't even allow little wins like announcing small grants or even responding from agencies. Not even the high profile, the regular rank and file, random members are more upset than ever. Members know they are going into the minority after the midterms. More explosive early resignations are coming. It's a tinderbox. Morale has never been lower. Mike Johnson will be stripped of his gavel, and they will lose the majority before this term is out. That's not a reporter summarizing what the reporter has found. That is a senior House Republican putting it in writing, in a text, saying members know they are going into the minority after the midterms. It's a tinderbox. Morale has never been lower. Mike Johnson will be stripped of his gavel. In other words, the senior House Republican who wrote that is a rational politician who can see that insane policies that hurt voters will hurt the party supporting those policies.
Lo que acabamos de ver es devastador para cualquier gobierno, pero para Trump es peor, porque mina el único pilar que él necesita para sobrevivir, la ilusión de fuerza, y esa ilusión se desmoronó. No es la prensa, no son los demócratas, no son los enemigos del pueblo, es su propia gente diciéndole que ya no creen en él, que ya no confían en su capacidad, que seguirlo es un boleto directo al fracaso político. Y mientras esa tormenta se desata, Trump hace lo que mejor sabe hacer cuando huele peligro: desaparecer. Canceló eventos, canceló apariciones, canceló todo. El presidente que presumía estar siempre trabajando decidió encerrarse en silencio junto en la semana en la que la prensa reconoce su deterioro mental, su cansancio crónico y su incapacidad para sostener el ritmo del cargo. Y hablando de eso, vamos con el siguiente clip, porque explica por qué esta retirada de Trump no es un descanso, es un síntoma del colapso.
Heading into the holidays, Donald Trump in the midst of what is clearly, measurably, the worst month of his second term, and usually presidents face this kind of hell month later in the term. So it's bad news coming earlier than usual, which is also bad news, as there are cries of a lame duck presidency. Consider within the last day, Trump's revenge cases completely blowing up. And remember, this is not like they made it to trial and James Comey found sympathetic jurors. This is not like they made it to jury selection and something changed. This, by any legal timeline, was a fast failure. And if you're counting, I've mentioned this in our coverage, there have now been 3 losses for Trump, 3 cases against foes, his perceived foes, that have completely fallen apart, and 0 wins. New polls show anger over prices. Americans more upset than the end of Biden's term. Trump's job approval crashing to record lows. As you see, it stacks up on the screen. But we're not done. We are in the middle of this month. Trump also faced that humiliating defeat with both parties telling him to stop hiding the sex traffickers' files. Some people in politics allege maybe Trump was involved, and early emails have him at least mentioned. Others say maybe he's not involved. But in this polarized moment, we had this rare unity where they all came together in Congress and said, enough, release the sex traffickers' files. Some people say they don't even want to know why Trump seems so intent on hiding them. And that means a deadline is now looming, stretching through this month into next, for Donald Trump's terrible November to comply. More Republicans defecting, some threatening to leave Congress. And if you go back 3 weeks, Trump lost when the Democrats had that election sweep. And that's how this hell month began for the president. You stack it all up, and even in these busy times with a million phone alerts, and what you see on your screen is overwhelming. Imagine if you were the politician at the center of all that. And those election wins or losses for Trump and his party, that was 3 weeks ago tonight. Though honestly, I don't know about you, could feel like a lot longer. And for Trump and his White House and the Republican Party, we know they think it's been a lot longer because they have been bruised every week since then. When you're dealt with bad news like that in politics, we all know the drill. You try to rebound, move on to something else. But all they've moved on to are defeats that in some ways were more robust, or at least involved more states, more representatives of more people in the Congress going after him on Epstein than the multi-state loss they suffered 3 weeks ago tonight. MAGA voices are not all denying this reality at this point. There are plenty of Trump defenders. We hear a lot about the loyalists, but a varied group of voices, including in our evolving digital media, right? You've got the live TV news, you got stuff on YouTube that includes traditional and new media, you got podcasts, you got social media. And so across this wider media audience, maybe in distinction from a place like Fox News, some voices with large audiences who are largely MAGA or MAGA curious, they see what's happening. They are facing the music even if Trump isn't. That includes the comedians, the podcasts, and even Fox vet Tucker.
And the Republican Party, which is almost to the point where it's just useless, and I'm going to have to oppose it because I hate them too much, but because they're such betrayers.
It certainly seems that he doesn't want these documents to come out because he himself will suffer some fallout.
Nothing I voted for happened. What about you? Are you happy with anything?
I mean, it sounds like a political wake. And because their audiences, especially Tucker, still include plenty of people who are conservative or Republican adjacent or MAGA, and labels can be simplistic, but you'll notice there's a tone there. They don't necessarily go directly at Trump and say, boy, he messed this all up. He had a good hand a year ago, and it seems like he blew it, spent the political capital quickly, and is still messed up on Epstein. They don't necessarily word it all that way, but that's not positive messaging, what you just heard, obviously, for Trump's Republican Party going into a midterms where Tucker's audience either is going to pull the lever for Republicans or hand the Congress over to Trump's opponents, the Democrats. Take another example, Michael Savage, conservative radio host. He was OG MAGA. He endorsed Trump early in 2016. In the first term, you could find him in the Oval Office. Here's Savage now.
I think the American worker.
Aquí se detalla el peor mes del segundo mandato de Trump. Derrotas judiciales aceleradas, casos de venganza que se deshacen antes siquiera de ir al juicio, encuestas hundidas, rechazo bipartidista por intentar ocultar archivos relacionados con un caso de tráfico, una ola de republicanos tomando distancia y un Congreso exigiéndole explicaciones. Para completar el cuadro, voces conservadoras históricamente leales, incluyendo comediantes, comentaristas y exfiguras de Fox, ahora hablan abiertamente del caso de decepción de un presidente que no cumplió absolutamente nada de lo prometido. Este último clip lo deja clarísimo. Lo que está ocurriendo no es un mal mes, es la factura de un proyecto político que se sostenía únicamente por miedo, y la creencia de que Trump era invencible, esa fantasía ya murió. El humorista conservador, el podcaster de derecha, el exaliado incómodo, todos coinciden en lo mismo. Nada de lo que votaron se cumplió. Lo que queda es frustración y cansancio de un presidente acorralado por sus propios errores, incapaz de enfrentar una sola entrevista sin delatar lo agotado que está. Y mientras el país se prepara para las fiestas, Trump se prepara para otra cosa: aferrarse al poder en silencio, rezando para que el público olvide las derrotas de este mes. No lo harán, ni su base lo está haciendo. Esto es Rumor de Estado. Hoy, en Rumor de Estado, estamos siguiendo una noticia que pone los nervios de punta en Washington. La Casa Blanca fue puesta en lockdown después de un tiroteo que dejó a 2 miembros de la Guardia Nacional gravemente heridos. Mientras las autoridades tratan de aclarar lo ocurrido, el presidente Trump, el mismo que pasó la semana amenazando abiertamente a congresistas, ya salió a opinar como si fuera el sheriff del país. Antes de entrar en su respuesta y en el efecto que esto tiene en la política de su seguridad, veamos primero el reporte inicial.
National Guard members were involved in a shooting near the White House this afternoon. At least one of them was struck, and the White House is currently on lockdown. Joining us, MS Now Justice and Intelligence reporter Ken Delaney, and along with MS Now National Security and Intelligence analyst and former FBI supervisor Rob D'Amico. So, Ken, what exactly do we know?
Basically just what you said, Katie. This shooting, I'm told, occurred near the White House in a place called Farragut Square in downtown D.C. We're seeing video on social media of police rushing to the scene. I checked in with the Secret Service because they protect the White House and was told that 2 uniformed National Guard members were involved in a shooting. At least one of them was struck. Their condition is not known. The nature of the incident was not known by this person. It's being handled by the D.C. police, not the Secret Service, because they've decided there's no nexus to the White House, no threat to the White House. So the circumstances of this incident are unclear. Remember, of course, that uniformed National Guard are regularly patrolling the streets of Washington, having been deployed there by President Trump. That's subject to a legal fight. Actually, 5 days ago, a judge ordered the Trump administration to halt that deployment. That's still being litigated. But again, so all we know is that 2 uniformed National Guard members involved in a shooting, one was struck. The condition of that person is unknown at this time.
Yeah, so the AP is reporting that 2 National Guard members were struck, the 2 that were involved. Again, that differs a little bit from our reporting. We'll see if that gets updated. Ken, you were saying that your sources have said there's no nexus. The FBI is saying no nexus. What does that mean?
The Secret Service, meaning there's no investigative, there's no angle for them to investigate this. They've already concluded there was no threat to the White House or the president. It's a shooting that occurred in D.C., and so it's being investigated and responded to by the D.C. police, not by the Secret Service. It remains to be seen. I've also checked in with the FBI. It's unclear at this point whether they will get involved. But right now, the D.C. police is responding, Katie.
All right, so the president is not in Washington right now. He's not at the White House, even though the White House is on lockdown. He, is in Florida for the holiday break. J.D. Vance,
Lo primero aquí es separar los hechos del ruido político. No sabemos aún qué motivó el ataque, ni en qué condiciones están los guardias heridos. Lo que sí sabemos es que en este país, cada vez que hay un incidente violento cerca del poder político, surge la misma sensación de fragilidad. Funcionarios, asesores, cuerpos de seguridad, todos viven bajo una tensión permanente que no debería ser normal. Y aún así, mientras todo esto pasa, el presidente Trump está en Florida, ajeno al caos, pero muy dispuesto a capitalizar la tragedia. Y después de ver este primer reporte, vamos a revisar cómo respondió él, porque su mensaje dice mucho más de lo que aparenta. Pasemos al siguiente fragmento. La ironía es grotesca. Trump se declara protector absoluto de las fuerzas de seguridad después de pasar la semana atacando a congresistas, alentando a sus seguidores más fanáticos y reviviendo el lenguaje que ya provocó violencia antes. Su mensaje en su red social no es condolencia ni liderazgo, es un recordatorio de poder, un yo mando aquí. Y claro, uno no puede evitar recordar que este es el mismo presidente que indultó a quienes golpearon brutalmente a oficiales del Capitolio, oficiales que hoy son los que responden a esos tiroteos en Washington. Es imposible leer las palabras sin preguntarse a quién pretende proteger realmente y quién está intentando intimidar. Y aunque uno no quisiera que esto fuera un hecho aislado, no lo es. Lo que viene a continuación lo demuestra perfectamente. Vamos con el siguiente clip.
Something that was pretty simple and non-controversial, and that was that members of the military should follow the law. And in response to that, Donald Trump said, I should be executed. I should be hanged. I should be prosecuted. He even went on and said something about go get them. I guess sending a mob to round me and the other folks up. So this is, I think it says a lot more about him than it says about me. He doesn't want accountability. But Rachel, I'm not going to be silenced. I'm not going to be intimidated.
When you and your colleagues made that video, were there specific, potentially illegal orders that you were thinking about that were the sort of precipitating cause for you guys to get together and do that?
Here's the thing, Rachel. You don't want to wait for your kid to get hit by a car before you tell them to look both ways. It's pretty simple. And if you go back to 2016, Donald Trump on a debate stage talking about, some action that he was going to take. He was reminded by the moderator that that would be illegal, that the military wouldn't be able to follow those orders. And his response, Donald Trump's response was the military would not refuse my orders. And then as president, he talked about shooting people, citizens of this country in the legs, protesters. Now, thankfully, Mark Esper, Mark Milley, explained to him that that would be not be a good idea. Now he's talking about the Insurrection Act, sending troops to more cities, using U.S. cities and as training grounds and U.S. citizens for training of the United States military. So, Rachel, we wanted to do something pretty simple here. We wanted to just remind folks that they need to comply with the law and be reminded, and also explain to members of the military that we have their backs, that we know what's going on. It's part of our job, accountability over the federal government. And this is the response we get. He told the world that we should be hanged.
I wanted to ask you about that pledge, that we have your backs. It's sort of the apex of that piece, that video that you made with your colleagues. What does that mean in practical terms? If I'm an enlisted service member somewhere, maybe I'm serving in Southern Command, maybe I'm asked to do something that I believe is illegal or that I have received advice might be illegal. If those service members are thinking about you right now as being on their side, as having their back, what does that mean in practical terms about what that service member can do when faced with a potentially illegal order from the commander-in-chief and from the chain of command?
Well, Rachel, I spent 25 years in the United States Navy. I flew 39 combat missions over Iraq and Kuwait. Let me start by saying I never questioned any order. And you're required to follow all legal orders. You're also required not to follow illegal ones. And I think most people can figure out, just take some common sense in what would be an illegal order. But I think it's important for people to know that they need to be able to stand up and speak out. And I wanted them to know that members of Congress understand that this president doesn't seem to care about the Constitution, the rule of law. And I have to say, I don't think there's anything more patriotic than standing up for the Constitution. And right here, right now, this week, the president clearly is not doing it.
Lo que acabamos de ver y de escuchar debería estremecer a cualquiera. Un senador, exmilitar con décadas de servicio, contando cómo el presidente de Estados Unidos sugiere su ejecución simplemente por recordarle lo que los soldados deben obedecer la ley. Es el tipo de intimidación que corroe a instituciones, normaliza la idea de que el poder se impone a punta de amenazas y lo más inquietante, se vuelve rutina. Cuando el país presencia un tiroteo a metros de la Casa Blanca, nuestra primera reacción ya no es preguntar qué pasó, sino preguntarnos qué va a publicar Trump, a quién va a convertir en enemigo y cuánta gasolina le va a echar a una situación que ya de por sí es tensa. Lo que vimos hoy es un síntoma de algo más profundo. Un clima político saturado de miedo, abuso de poder y violencia alentada desde arriba. Mientras las autoridades investigan el tiroteo, el presidente Trump sigue explotando cada crisis para fortalecer su imagen de mando absoluto. Aunque eso implique avivar el resentimiento, deslegitimar a sus críticos y poner en riesgo a quienes simplemente cumplen su trabajo. Esto es Rumor de Estado.